Welcome to the Industry of UX, Episode 4. Paul Pittman and I put together a series for folks that are interested in moving to the UX world, for new UX designers, and for veterans that are interested in a different perspective. In the last episode, we talked about getting ready for the job market in the industry of UX. So we covered portfolio, resume, and a few other things. In this episode, we are talking about how to get ready for UX interviews, how the Amazon and Zappos hiring processes work, and how to tackle whiteboard challenges. In the next episodes, we're also going to cover what your first UX job might look like, how to establish a UX-friendly culture, design systems, and more. You can subscribe to the Industry of UX on your favorite podcast app, and you can also visit theindustryofux.com and send feedback to hello@theindustryofux.com. Thank you so much for listening. Let's dive right into the episode with a question. Paul, can you walk us through the Amazon hiring process?
I've been through it, obviously, and it is, it could be intimidating, but the thing is, what I want to push forward is that if you believe in what you do and you believe you're really good at what you do, that's really all you have to do when it comes to an interview, no matter what interview you're in, how rigorous it is, right? If you know what it is that you're doing and you're good at your job, then going through the interview, you should go in there with that type of thinking and that kind of level of confidence. With that said, working for a company like Amazon and going through through their interview process, they know this. Like, they really already know what they would expect from candidates, and they know if candidates are that let's say confident, equipped, and knowledgeable in their specific field, they know how to get that information out of you. And that's why that process at Amazon is so rigorous. It's not because they're trying to, put people in high positions and make themselves feel great or anything like these lines, or just to create process for the sake of creating process. They are doing this because they know generally what they're doing. And to me, that's how I felt when I went through the interview. Even though I felt like I knew my material and I knew exactly what I am good at and what I'm not good at, it was still a great interview process to get a level of validation for myself and to also learn something along the way. So when I look at the Amazon process, it's basically an all-day process, right? So you can apply through any social media. You can apply through their website. They do grab your resumes. They put them in the system. These resumes get reviewed by our in-house recruiters, and then you get matched up with positions that are happening inside of Amazon. And even if there was not a position at that time, they will still have your resume on file to be surfaced when there does become a position available. So it's not like it just sits in outer space and just goes away. Now, the level of communication that happens after that only occurs when there's HM that's interested in knowing more about you based on your resume. So right now, currently, we call them hiring managers. And I'm in that process right now of reviewing resumes and going through portfolios. So let me kind of break that down to what that means at Amazon. So we will get your resume. A recruiter or even an HM could find you within our systems, and then they will review your resume. They'll be interested in the candidate based on the resume, and they'll be pushed to what we call a phone screen. So if your resume is strong enough and we look at your portfolio, we see the stuff that you've worked on, and if there's an alignment with what our initiatives are and what our organization is trying to do, we will request you to go through a phone screen. And there's two phone screens. One is initial, hey, how you doing? Tell me about yourself. Show me some of the work that you worked on. And then that will be held by somebody who's in the interviewing, doesn't even have to be part of the team, but as far as the interview loop is concerned. So they'll look at your stuff and they'll be like, okay, you know what? This candidate seems like they've got some knowledge. Let's put them to a second phone screen and see, maybe even at the second phone screen, it might be with somebody on the team as opposed just to another designer. So that's another thing I want to touch upon, is that anybody who's doing a phone screen won't always come from the team. They can come from any team within inside of Amazon. So that's another really great thing. So they're not going in there with this intention to be basically sold on just your team. That does happen at some point, but as a phone screen, it's just more of an assessment. Once you pass the first and the second, then we are committed at Amazon to do a 2 and 5. So basically means after first initially contacting the candidate, we have 2 days to reply back to the system to say if we want to move the candidate to the next step. And then we have 5 days to commit them to an internal loop. So 2 days, we guarantee to have a phone screen. And after 2 days, we've got 5 days left to line them up for an interview, which is the in-house loop. So early stages phase, we got phone screen 1, phone screen 2. Once that's happened, and we say, let's push them through the loop, then you go through an all-day loop, which basically means you'll meet with about 5 or so, if not more, individuals inside of Amazon that are more closely tied to the team now. And they're going to take you through a stand-up presentation to talk about your projects. We're going to put you through a bar raiser session. So they'll bring somebody in that we call a bar raiser at Amazon. And what that basically means is that this is a person who says, you know what, this candidate is actually setting the bar. And this is the person that we would like to see within our organization. From there, there's a whiteboard session. Don't think too heavily as far as trying to present an end solution within the whiteboard. All you're really trying to do is understand the problem and your thinking process. That's really what we want to know, that you're going through that. It's not like we're saying we're going to just basically put this nice pretty picture together and not understand the end-to-end experience that we're trying to actually solve for. And that's basically how that goes. And then there's a lunch where we're having some more discussions around some of the Amazon leadership principles. And Amazon interviewers always lean on those LPs, those leadership principles, to help understand the candidate's strengths and weaknesses when joining the organization, to see how much alignment that there is. Plus, there's a little bit of a cultural fit that we look at with these leadership principles. And then basically, once that's done, the team gets together, they all start to write together their feedback. And it's a group session where the manager does have the last call. So there's a vote that happens. And if everybody's inclined, which is what we call a yes, thumbs up, great, it's going to be a direct fit. If there's a mishmash, maybe 50-50, the manager obviously still decides if the candidate, even if everybody's inclined and the manager's not, that candidate might not get the opportunity. So at the end of it, that's Amazon's process in a nutshell. It's not, and as long as you learn the LPs and you can lean on those and apply them to the stuff that you worked on, I think you'd be in really good shape just out the gate to get the interview process going in your favor. With that said, even if you're not a fit for the organization, there still might be, hey, you know what? Good skills, really qualified, smart individual, just not a fit for us. Inclined, but not for our position. That's still a good thing, because they may be even doing you a favor by saying, you know what, this candidate could do better over here, and that actually might make you happier in an actual position, rather than a position that you might not be happier in, or best to be excelling at. So with that said, those types of things, and when you're looking at Amazon as a interviewing process, is a really important, great, rigorous process. And hopefully at the end of it, if we still have 2 days to reply back to the candidate after the interview has happened, that the recruiter will reach out and say, great, it's going to be a good fit. Then you can start looking at an offer. They'll send you some information. You kind of go back. There's some negotiation. And then basically the rest is history. You sign a dotted line and welcome aboard.
The process at Zappos is a little bit different. Although Zappos is owned by Amazon, we don't necessarily have the same exact interview loop as Amazon. Ours is a little bit different. And it's loosely, I guess, based on Amazon. And we definitely have changed our hiring process a few times. But I guess one thing that stays true to Amazon and Zappos and many companies out there is the fact that you have to learn a little bit about the company before you actually start an interview process. So Paul was mentioning LPs and leadership principles, which is the same thing. At Zappos, we have core values. And these are principles and values that are chosen by the company to be representative of the culture of the company itself. They are essentially the charter for the company culture. And these are great principles and great core values that if you get to learn them ahead of time, you can actually bring up during your interview and you can actually leverage to your benefit. So you actually present relevant information and you answer questions in a relevant manner to the company. And Amazon is pretty big on leadership principles. I know, Paul, you just bring them up randomly in our conversations, in our one-on-ones. So it is almost shaping the way we speak sometimes. And it's good that you guys out there know that, because it's good that you prepare yourself to learn these principles ahead of time before you actually get on an interview. So with that said, I actually want to tell a little bit about my Zappos hiring story. essentially, my Zappos hiring story is a story of 2.5 months. A lot of the emphasis of the Zappos hiring process for tech and then UX specifically is put ahead of the in-person interview. So for me, I got my first screener with HR, where they made sure that pretty much I was not a crazy person. Basically, my first interview was with the hiring manager, which was also the UX manager at the time, with someone else from the team, and it was my first technical interview. So we talked about design thinking, we talked about UX, we talked about some of the projects, we talked about my resume, my portfolio, and so forth. And then I had 6 more interviews like that one, but with different members of the team. Some of them were from UX. I had a product, I had a dev. So it was a very comprehensive panel of folks that pretty much grilled me for 7 interviews, consecutive interviews. And at the end of it, HR reached out again and said, this looks like this is a go. Here is a challenge for you. And they sent me a UX challenge to kind of go through, right? So I had to basically start creating something, I don't remember if it was an app or a website, but I had to start from scratch, doing the research, understanding, what problem I was trying to solve for and all of that, bring up, secondary research and all of that. And I had only a few days to put it together. And then I sent it over and I was invited on campus. So then on campus, since all the technical interviews were already out of the way, we pretty much looked at a culture fit. So the first part of the day, which by the way was like a whole day thing, right? So the first part of the day was dedicated to me presenting my UX challenge and articulating the design decisions that I made when I delivered that challenge, that app or website. And then we went to lunch and I started looking at team fit. And then in the afternoon, we did a quick ideation exercise, sort of like a design sprint about some problem that we came up with. And then we did a happy hour. I actually have a question for you, Paul. So now that we talked about your Amazon story and how rigorous the process at Amazon is, and I talked about the Zappos hiring process. So I wanted to ask you how important it is to be prepared and articulate design decisions when you are going through an interview process.
Oh yeah. So I mean the one term that I use a lot in the industry and stuff, and even when I'm instructing, is SME, which is the subject matter expert, right? So when I look at someone, even in an interview, I want to see how well they know the material, right? How much of a subject matter expert are they in the material that they're presenting, right? And even if it's not like an entire solution, but at least a feature, how much backstory is of this that they know and understand. So with that said, that's to me the starting foundation. And then the next level is if you can articulate that in a way that someone who doesn't understand UX can understand it, is going to put you leaps and bounds with inside of an interview process, right? So, because you're going to have sometimes in an interview, even in my loop, I've had some developers in there, not just designers. So to articulate what I think as a solution to something is one of the key factors in how you're going to get people to understand you and your solution and the offering. So that's kind of how I break it down. So with that said, articulation, how you present yourself in a way that's clearly understood is very important. Right? We don't want to hear people who sound like know-it-alls and they use acronyms left, right, and center within their talks, or they feel like everything is rainbows and unicorns, right? We live in a world of reality, and some offerings don't always work, right? So, and if you can articulate that in a way that makes sense to somebody as to why it didn't work and why some things don't work, I think that's going to give you so much leverage in understanding how to better connect with your people who are interviewing you, if that makes sense. Right? Because if you can't articulate something and communicate a message correctly, you're just going to have people kind of pretty much gloss over, right? And it's unfortunate because I've experienced that, where I've seen some glossing happening because somebody couldn't communicate something. You can tell when they're just spinning and not going anywhere, and then as a hiring manager, you got to kind of step in and sort of manage that on a level, and that's not where the interview should go. So on that sense, articulation and subject matter expert to me kind of go hand in hand. The better you know the material and the better that you can explain it, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, if you have a strong portfolio and you know it inside out, that's going to prepare you for a great interview process. And honestly, again, we cannot stress this enough, but whatever you present, both in your portfolio and an interview, make sure that you can back up your design decisions and articulate them correctly. So when you're backing up your design decisions, bring data, bring user data, bring analytics, bring secondary research. What happened behind the design decisions that you made to create this solution? So what is the framework behind the solution that allowed it to arrive at that solution? So back up your solutions. And I know that I sound like a broken record, but this is vital in UX.
Yep, absolutely. And then, when you look at having sort of your ducks in a row and your T's crossed, your I's dotted, all that stuff, that when you present your material, I can tell you from a hiring manager's perspective what they're looking for, and that they're looking for somebody to give them guidance, right? So even that they're looking for that level of guidance, they're also looking for a cultural fit, right? Because sometimes these hiring managers are not going to be UX professionals. They can be anybody. They could be any kind of stakeholder that's going to be in the room, right?
Yeah,
Like
you can be reporting to the CMO, right?
Mhm.
You can be
Yep.
reporting to. It happens that you're going to report to maybe a dev manager, so
Mhm.
someone that doesn't necessarily, as you mentioned, have that much expertise when it comes to design.
Mhm. Exactly. Like my manager today, he's a development manager. He's not UX related. And I think that's great, actually mixed, to be honest. It's a good little chemistry because I get to learn and integrate stuff through dev and understand how they do their processes. And then they can learn and understand how UX does their processes. And then, between the two, there's a really good synergy that happens, right? And when it comes to an interview, that's what you want, is that level of synergy. And if you can present it in a way that makes sense and you can connect with your audience, then better off you are. And I know not everybody has that skill of confidence and being able to communicate properly, but if you're nervous on that level, just lean on what you know and just be good at what you know and talk about what you know, because that should get you excited enough to have the conversation and not worry about who's listening to it. That's how I usually do my interviews. It's not that sort of imagine everybody in their underwear approach. It's the, I know my stuff, and if I get to learn something from this is not a loss for me. So that's how if you could think of it in that level, maybe de-stress a little bit during the interview process.
That's a great point. And something else that I wanted to mention, and something else that I wanted to maybe talk about, are the infamous whiteboarding exercises during
Sure.
interviews, because with
Fun.
UX, it is fun. With UX, whiteboarding is a pretty big staple, right?
Oh yeah, it's like
And
this. You ever watch that movie Beautiful Mind? You ever watch that?
oh yes,
Russell Crowe, I think it's, yeah, and he's got those papers and things all over the place. That's what it's like, right? Like doing the whiteboard session. I remember walking into a whiteboard session. It was like walking into the beautiful mind. It's like all these things, like lines, and devs do it too. They whiteboard as well. So it's not like you're whiteboarding on your own, and nobody knows how to whiteboard. But people in all of Zappos and all of Amazon, they whiteboard.
I mean, whiteboarding is nothing more than putting what's in your head somewhere that is not your head anymore,
Yeah.
basically outside of your head.
Yeah.
Because if it stays in your head, you can't really iterate on it. It may be hard to articulate to others. Communication is going to be an issue. So whatever it is that you have it in your head, if you can whiteboard it using a chart, a diagram, whatever exercise you want to do, it's going to give you an extra gear. Paul, do you have any template that you use that you could go through, like not necessarily from a hiring manager standpoint, but from an applicant? What should they be expecting when they get asked to go to the whiteboard and
Mm-hmm.
do the exercise?
Definitely. Oh yeah, I could tell you what you as a white person doing the whiteboard should be expecting and what the person asking you to do the whiteboard should be expecting. So
Let's go.
let's start with the latter. So as a hiring manager, I'm not looking for an end all solution. If I ask for a whiteboard session, utterly surprised you come up with an end-to-end solution on a whiteboard, because you don't have enough information at that state. Let's be rational, right? And you need to know that. You need to know that you don't have all the data, and ramp up to what it is that you need to solve completely. What you need to understand when you do a whiteboard session is your thinking process. So what I do, and I think this is very common in the industry, is that you start off with the problem statement. Lay that out, right? Make sure that that's stated there. Write it on the whiteboard what the problem statement is. Maybe there's more than one problem statement. Who knows? But write them out. So now you have something to start with, right? Then start thinking about how you can make this story make sense to the user, right? And I try to break it down in my head like chapters, right? So if someone says to me, like, and it happens at Amazon, I think for mine it was design me an app that someone can order coffee, and that was it. And I didn't know any information as an order coffee where, like, go pick it up at the restaurant, at the coffee shop. Do I get it brought to me? Like, I don't know that information. So then I write my problem statement. Here's the problem. I want to order coffee. I'm at my office. Here's a problem. Then from there, you kind of break down certain scenarios, right? And that's really what we want to do. Have some scenarios and some use cases as to how this problem is going to be surfaced and how you're going to fix it through use cases. Then once you kind of get that structured,
can you make an example of a use case?
Yeah, sure. So a use case could be, okay, here's the problem. We have a customer that is working at the office, and they want to order coffee, have it brought to them. So this use case says to me, I'm Jane Doe, I'm having a rough day. I need to work late at night. I'm worried about leaving late at night to go get my car just to get coffee. It'd be really convenient if I had somebody come here and bring it to me. I don't want to order it on my desktop because I'm on my work computer. It'd be more convenient for me to have it on my phone, maybe preferably a downloadable app. And it would be great that when I order this, that if I'm doing it for the first time, that my credit card gets integrated seamlessly, and I don't have to do too much thinking. And I want to make sure that they have my choices, because I like a decaf, I like a latte, pumpkin spice, and I like extra hot. So there's a use case right there. So with that use case, you say to yourselves, okay, so from a problem statement, we need choice, we need offering, we need a place that's going to deliver late. Then we can think about how they're going to get access to get connected to this person. How are they going to come to the building? All these types of things. So there's going to probably be some messaging application inside of that, meaning that, it's 9 o'clock. They don't have keys to get into the building to your floor because you're in the office. That means they're going to tell you when they arrive. And you're going to need something like that in there. So now you can see where I'm going with all of this, right? So the design thinking is there. You don't have a solution. And usually in a whiteboard session, you get like what? I'm not sure how long you got, Filippo, but I got like 30 minutes. So let's be reasonable. You can design.
I didn't really get a whiteboard exercise with Zappos because I had to create this app ahead of time. I had a couple of days to do it at home. So I didn't get a whiteboard challenge at work, but I did get, as a hiring manager at Zappos, I did put folks through a whiteboard challenge. So I have been close to the hiring manager and administering this whiteboard challenge. So yep, I've been there.
So to me, when I find it really a very fun process, and I really like the collaboration, right? So that's the next part to the whiteboard. So with what I just said there, that's enough to sort of get the conversation going, but then now you got to bring the person into the conversation, right? So when you at Amazon, we look for that. If you think you're going to sit up there in silo and design anything and not ask or incorporate a conversation with whoever's in the room, it will be a strike against you. So there's a little Easter egg for you, meaning that who's ever there and they've asked you to design this problem, pump them for some information, get something out of them, anything. They're looking for it, right? They're not going to have answers for you, but they're going to give you some type of response. Right. So, and bring them in because you need that level of collaboration. So to me, in the nutshell, that's where you start. Then in that process, not just writing down words and things like that, you can break down certain thumbs that break down, okay, here's this page that could communicate out this. And then to transition smoothly from this to this just square box, give it a name, you'd want to go this route. Now you're looking at general task flow as part of your whiteboard session. So, and then that's as far as I would take it. And if you can communicate that correctly from a problem statement, incorporating some use cases, understanding the user, creating a task flow to understand how you're going to get from A to B or A to Z, that's going to be really what you're going to get. And then having someone to be brought into that conversation that's in the room, I think you're going to hit all the check boxes. For me, that's what I looked for. That's what I gave. And I think it went really, really well. Because I think what ended up happening is that even though I didn't have all the answers, we got some really cool ideas. And that's really what you want to do, right? Because once you get those level of ideas, you can present them and see what people's feedback are, do some, all the next level stuff, and that is research and testing and data and all these other things that go along with leaving the whiteboard to the next step. That's it. I mean, I think it probably sounds simple. And I think it's worth it for you to even spend some time, if you can. I did. And just to make sure that even though most stuff I'm writing up there is really gibberish, because only I can understand it, probably because my handwriting is so messy, it's good just to at least get you to go through a few iterations of your own and have an exercise before you go and present yourself into a whiteboard session.
Yes, I think you really hit the nail on the head. And as a hiring manager or someone that is actually in the room and administering this whiteboard exercise, I think some of the key points you already mentioned, but I wanted to add a couple. So I want to stress, first off, the communication with whoever is in the room. Treat them like they are your stakeholders and your users at the same time, because they are asking you to design something. So if you have questions, don't just come up with your own answers in your head. Turn around and ask them, or just say the question out loud, because this is also another window into your way of thinking, into your way of arriving eventually to a solution. So we want to see that if you're quiet and asking questions in your head and answering your own questions, as Paul said, it's not a good sign. So be very vocal. I know that sometimes for some folks out there, it is a little bit of a daunting task, but be vocal. Ask questions to whoever is in the room. Ask them about if they have already any data, if you want them to produce data on the spot. If they don't, they're going to tell you no, to come up with it, and that's perfectly fine. Ask them how they purchase. In this case, I will ask whoever is in the room, hey, like if I were your interviewee and you were my interviewer, I will ask you, hey, how do you purchase coffee? Do you order coffee on an app? Do you use the Starbucks app? Because I want to know, okay, so I have my own biases, my own process, but I also want to know, like, let's do some empathizing here on the spot. So you're also showing that you're actually looking for information outside of your own head, which is really good. And I guess the other thing is, yes, I would also agree that going all the way to wireframing, sometimes it's a little bit excessive, especially if you have only 30 minutes. So actually focusing on those early stages of UX design, it's perfectly fine. And it gives plenty of information for your hiring manager and for whoever else is in the room to understand that you're doing the right thing. But I will say what I'm specifically interested in seeing is also exploration, meaning, when you design a task flow, when you go into your ideation, show a little bit more than just, hey, I have this version in mind and that's the end all be all of it. Show, how, you start from one and maybe iterate on another one on top of it. So instead of maybe erasing one, you move to a different version and you explore different options, exploring different task flows, and absolutely prepare for it. So people that do really well in whiteboarding challenges are people that actually have spent a little bit of time early on at home to go through some examples. You don't have to necessarily spend hours and hours, but even just reviewing some common type of whiteboarding challenges. And Paul, just gave a perfect example of one. For instance, if I told my participant or my applicant, hey, design a coffee ordering app, right? And the first thing that I did was designing an interface and laying out how the menu looks and how the app works. Mm-hmm. That would be a major red flag, because it shows me that you don't even care how the user is experiencing these problems. You don't necessarily wanting to understand what the problem you're solving for actually is, but it's just, you just want to design an interface, which is perfectly fine if you're applying for a UI or a visual design position. But if you're applying for UX, that's a red flag. I think that kind of covers it, Paul. We covered a lot. ground between Amazon, Zappos, how to
Oh yeah.
articulate design decision in interviews,
Hmm.
whiteboarding. Kind of the closing topic here is, what is the thinking process actually that you are, as you see it, you say, or you think, well, this is exactly what we're looking for?
Hmm. So this goes back to the subject matter expert again. So people who rely on data and research to make informed decisions. That's what I find really attractive. It's like we're going on a date. It's like no different than when you try and find your spouse, right? You try and make the best choice by making the right decisions, right? They don't always work out, but that's okay. And if they don't work out, what did you learn? So when I look at candidates coming in, that's really what the first thing I'm looking for. Because there's a lot of things that we do with other systems like design systems and design languages and so on and so forth that make our jobs easier from a UI perspective. So I really want a thinker and a problem solver and someone who can message that stuff out to anybody who needs to hear it in a way that it makes sense.
I think that I will be looking for the same person. And when you see someone approaching the entire job interview that way, you know you want to hire them right away. I think that if you listen to this podcast and really take our advice, you are going to be really prepared for your next series of interviews. You're going to be ready to go. And I think that that's exactly what we want to bring to the table, right? Actual examples of actual UX in the real world. And that's the end of my chat with Paul. Thank you so much for listening. You can show support for this podcast by subscribing to the Industry of UX on your favorite podcast app. And you can visit theindustryofux.com and send us feedback to hello@theindustryofux.com. Once again, thanks for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day.